2022 has been a year plagued by losses, frauds, and hacks. But the new year brings new beginnings. Can we pick up the pieces and build something more resilient?
And the builders are just going to quietly keep building what the rest of the world does not understand is the future of finance and commercial transactions, such that by the end of this year, people will be like, how could I have missed that such incredible technology, such really world-changing impact was developed in such a short span of time and was made so safe.
Bug bounty is one way to protect against security exploits, but how do we identify fraud? The biggest lesson learned from the FTX collapse is the importance of whistleblowing. How do we bake that into the industry going forward? Coming up on Word on the Block, Mitchell Amador, CEO of Immunefi, joins us to dive deep into those topics and a whole lot more. The cryptocurrency market lost over $2 trillion in value last year and over $3.7 billion in hacks alone. And that all happened with Terra-Luna's algorithmic disaster, Three Arrows contagion, and of course FTX, once the industry's golden child, now a very distinctive black eye. So if anyone needs a New Year's resolution, look no further than the cryptocurrency industry. But builders have been pointing at centralized finance, or CeFi, as the point of failures in the industry last year. But decentralized finance, or DeFi, has had its own battles with hacks. So how will this industry evolve to its next chapter, and can it stop the rising number of exploits? Today, we dive into the front lines of this cyber battle. Welcome to Word on the Block, the series that takes a deeper dive into blockchain and all the emerging technologies that shape our world at the intersection of business, politics, and economy. It's what we cover right here on Forkast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Angie Lau. All right, well, welcome to the show. Let's get right to it. We are in conversation with Mitchell Amador. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Immunefi. This is a blockchain security firm that has handed out nearly $66 million in bug bounties since December 2020. Mitchell, thanks for joining in. I love it. Bug bounties. It sounds like a sci-fi movie, but in fact, it is very real. Explain bug bounties and the way that you really incentivize this emerging industry of Web3, blockchain and crypto and DeFi and all of these things, and came up with something that hopefully makes this industry a little bit more resilient with bug bounties.
Well, resiliency is good. We've definitely done that. But the hope is that we build real anti-fragility, right? So the great advantage of what we're doing with DeFi, with blockchain in general, is opening up finance to the entire world, creating this trustless system for anyone to engage. Now, the consequence of that is the innards of this new financial system are all open. They're all transparent. Anybody can poke around. And if there are any mistakes anywhere in people's code, they can be exploited. Now, that's very scary because there's bugs in absolutely everything software related. And so when we saw this, we knew, okay, we need a solution. We need a solution that's going to operate at a global scale. How do we incentivize protection of software, of code, when most of that code is going to be transparent to the entirety of the world, and it's going to be involving billions and eventually trillions of dollars? What do? Well, you can't stop vulnerabilities. They're going to be there. People make mistakes on the best of days. But what you can do is get a million eyes looking at every single piece of major code in the world that's storing this value. And in front of a million people's eyes, no vulnerability survives for very long. So a bug bounty is just a way to create a prize, a massive financial and social incentive for the entire world security community to review and safeguard code together, find vulnerabilities, and then make the disclosure so that the entire system is safe. It's long proven in traditional internet tech, but we've really seen it supercharged where blockchain is concerned.
One could argue it's one of the greatest ironies, Mitchell, in blockchain. You have, incredible technology. You have smart contracts and crypto transactions, and it's supposed to be immutable. And then all anyone can point to as the greatest failure and point of weakness are the hacks. if you can be, isn't blockchain supposed to be immutable and so secure? And then how do you explain these multi-billion-dollar hacks at times, and sometimes to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars?
With blockchain, we have this incredible ability to digitize, to remove friction and costs from social infrastructure. And that's just what finance is, right? Finding better ways and cheaper ways to move goods and services around. But the cost of that, okay, now we're taking all this very sensitive business logic that once lived in people's heads, where there was liability and courts and all these very expensive but effective constraints on bad behavior, and we put it into code. And the nice thing about the code is that it has no need for most of these constraints. It does what it says. But the problem is people write bad code. And so, what is there to say? Well, we have this new system for incorporating business logic, for coordinating society. It's dramatically more efficient. Tens of thousands of times more efficient than hiring thousands and tens of thousands of people to do the same functions. But it is as safe as the designer's discipline in their code. So there's going to be, over the next several decades, as there already has been with the rise of computers, there's going to be an incredible amount of wear and tear. There's going to be an incredible amount of stress as we figure out how to do this safely. But when we get to the end of that road, we're going to have ultra efficient, ultra low cost, ultra trustworthy social infrastructure that people will look back and be like, well, of course it was going to be on chain. How could it be any other way? What are we going to do? Pay 10,000 times the cost to send money around the world? That's ridiculous.
How are you starting off this year as you take a look at the landscape and what you need to do? Does what you're doing at Immunefi potentially protect us from the fraudsters, from the Ponzi's, from the front running and all of those things? Or is this just one tool in the weaponry that still needs to be developed?
Probably the most important answer I can give is to the first question. So how are we feeling? Well, I would say, at Immunefi, we're feeling very optimistic. We see the direction the technology is going. From a big picture, when you think of the level of civilizations and how blockchain is going to be impacting the world, it's hard not to be very, very happy with how the technology is developing. And when we see the problems that we hit, right, this problem of fraud, fundamentally, that occurred, it was a fundamentally human problem. It wasn't a code problem. It was a human problem. And that this is the stress that is putting the industry under, at least in where the American market is concerned, is very, very good because it shows the effectiveness, right? This massive stress on the industry shows the effectiveness of decentralized finance. So by comparison, while we had liquidations left, right, and center, while we had an enormous amount of market stress, while we had all these concerns, all the DeFi protocols, which is our primary job to protect, they operated like clockwork, without problems, without stresses themselves. It was very beautiful, quite frankly, to see how effective these things could be. So, that's the first thing I would say. I would say we're optimistic about the future. And from the perspective of the many builders in the space, the builders are just going to quietly keep building what the rest of the world does not understand is the future of finance and commercial transactions, such that by the end of this year, people will be like, how could I have missed that such incredible technology, with really world-changing impact, was developed in such a short span of time and was made so safe?
Do you think there's room for Immunefi and or the industry to create, in the same way that you've done with the bug bounty, a whistleblower bounty that points out these failures or really huge red flags, which ultimately was revealed through some really great investigative journalism, but it surfaced to the top, and when people saw it, they had every right to be very worried and concerned. Do you think that there's room for that? Have you thought about that even over at Immunefi?
We have. Various parties suggested it to us that this is something that we should explore. Of course, we thought that hacks would be the most serious problem that needed to be solved. And so we focused our energy on that, something I don't regret. But it's not, have we thought of it? We are certain that this will come to exist, whether by our hand or someone else's. There is a fundamental need for a kind of whistleblowing function that brings transparency that is already baked into the culture of this industry and of this market. So it's just a matter of lining up the financial incentives. And a variety of parties, such as us, have shown how you can create that from scratch, how you can create a market for engaging in healthy pro-social behavior, how you can get paid to do what is right. So it's just waiting on some very savvy, slightly eccentric person to come along and decide that they want to solve it. I bet it'll be a very talented journalist, I hope it will, who will come along and say, I've cracked the code. Here's how we can financially incentivize whistleblowing at scale.
Hold on to that thought. We're going to take a quick break, Mitchell. But everyone, when we return, we're going to be diving into the gaps in blockchain architecture that are filling these hacks. But let's see what the industry can do with it. Don't go anywhere. They say that cross-chain bridges are the Achilles heel of DeFi. But what makes them vulnerable? And are cross-chain bridges the biggest security risk to Web3 in 2023? When Word on the Block returns.
If you don't understand the future, you'll never see your place in it. Introducing Forkast Plus, covering all things blockchain, independent reporting, insights, and access from Asia to the world. We cut through the noise where technology, insights, and access meet, where smart conversations happen. Make friends with disruption. Forkast Plus.
All right, welcome back. We're here with Mitchell Amador from Immunefi, and we're getting ready to get into the weeds of perhaps the most targeted infrastructures in blockchain, cross-chain bridges, okay? Because help us understand cross-chain bridges, because it seems like that is an area of vulnerability. This is where we have two protocols that need to interact together in an interoperable way. And these bridges allow these two protocols to transfer value, transfer smart contracts, whatever it is. It is the on-ramping, off-ramping, on these bridges that seem to create really huge vulnerabilities. It drained $1.3 billion of crypto last year. That's a third of the lost value in 2022. Why? Why such vulnerability here?
The reason for that is that they're the central point of aggregation for funds. They're the central point of aggregation for funds for intrepid people moving across chain. If we think of every chain as a new market or as a new country, well, it takes time. You have to go through all the checks. Now, every one of these protocols, these blockchains, is like its own massive database. It stores the data in a different way. It has its own conditions. And when you're moving value to another chain, what you're really doing is you're locking, right, the value you have on one chain in this bridge contract, and then getting some copy of that you can go freely spend in this new market, in this new environment to do whatever it is that you'd like to do. This results in, over time, mass aggregation of resources as they get locked up in this bridge. And you can see someone making many, many hops across the same set of bridges, right? If they're going through 5 or 10 different blockchains and they're using a bridge every single time, you could see how more and more and more capital is getting locked there. Now, it just so happens that communicating between databases really isn't that easy, especially when they are very, very different in their construction and architecture. And so these bridges not only aggregate value, but they're also very sensitive and difficult to protect. We combine that with some of the most demanding security requirements in the world, right? Most of these are obligated to be trustless. The problem with a number of these historically was the trustful component, such as the Harmony hack. You know, someone got access to the multi-sig, or the Ronin hack. Again, an attacker got access to the multi-sig. So you have these demanding requirements to be trustless, as we see with a number of the better bridges like Wormhole Layer 0. But that means you have to have all sorts of layers of protection. You need monitoring and very secure code on whatever chain you're interacting with on one side, and on every other side. You need monitoring of any keys or stoppage functions. You need monitoring of how those keys are stored on chain. So something like the Guardian network for Wormhole. There's a variety of others. You need monitoring for all of that off-chain infrastructure. You need monitoring of any of the oracles that you're using to make sure the value is the same, that you're not being defrauded. It's very, very complex. And if you have
it's very costly.
Very. Only the biggest. Every bridge is a global play. You know, every bridge project understands that if they succeed, they will be a central point, a central piece of the fight, the river of cash flows worldwide. You have to pour out millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into securing these things, and you have to go through all this complexity to do so. And if you make any mistake, there are attackers who would love the chance to take all that money. And so that's why bridges can't help. By the very nature of how grand they are and how important that they're going to be in the future as key financial infrastructure in a decentralized financial world, that makes them the biggest possible target for potential attackers.
So it then comes in the business model of, if it's so costly, obviously, to protect the base value, the principle of, the money or the value flowing between the protocols, there's value there, but who picks up the tab?
Bridges are like the 7 C's on which global trade runs today. Who picks up the tab for that? Well, effectively the World Trade Organization and arguably the United States Navy pick up the tab for that, and they accrue certain benefits as a result of doing so. The bridge parties, while very important, are surely foreseeing their own right to accrue certain benefits as a result of creating this globally critical infrastructure. So far, we haven't seen strict monetization. I'm sure that will come. It has to come in order to safeguard trillions of dollars in value, and that's what they're all aiming for.
So these funds that are out in the wild now, is there a way to recover them? Is there a way to get it back?
Absolutely. And there have been a great number of successful cases in the recovery of funds. Now, the great advantage for criminal activity in crypto is the ability to almost effortlessly and due to single error and minor errors, take a vast amount of value. But the flip side of that is crypto is a very dangerous place to operate criminally because there is a permanent record of every step that you take. This is not a place where you can hide. And if you made even a single mistake in the process of moving that value out, you can be tracked down and you can be persuaded to return the funds. And there have been a great number of cases like such. Crypto is an ideal environment for a one-off opportunity, but for a career, it's a horrible and dangerous place to be. And we've seen this many, many, many times. Even some of the suspected attacker in the Ronin case was the Lazarus Group, right? North Korean hacking communities. And even then, some funds were recovered, and they would not give it back willingly. It's very hard to get away with what you steal in our industry. And there have been cases that are 4, 5, 6 years old where people are found later. Do you want to bet that you can hide for eternity? Because when you're hacking on chain, that's the bet you're making, whether you know it or not.
You always have to look behind your shoulder or who's glaring at you behind the screen. It'll always catch up. This is the universal truth of life, whether it's on chain or off. Let's take a quick break, Mitchell. When we return, the FTX hack, I want to talk to you about that, the infamous Lazarus Group, as you noted, and a whole lot more when we come back.
As crypto goes mainstream, will we see a rise in organized crime? And more countries are looking to adopt CBDCs, but have they turned a blind eye to the associated security risks? More when we come back.
All right, welcome back. We are with Mitchell Amador of Immunefi, and you named some of the bad guys, Lazarus Group, all the rest. And we talked about recovering funds. We're starting to see crypto being used as the method of payment, and even outside of blockchain and hacks. But I'm talking about hacks of databases, local businesses, national businesses, databases, and they ask for crypto. Is this a smart idea? Is there You talked about, there's a way to recover, but are the authority, who's doing that? Is it the FBI? Is it the reigning authorities? Is there a group, even within the industry, that are the bounty hunters and who will track down who the bad guys are via blockchain? How do people get retribution here and recovery of funds?
Well, the order of those two terms is very important, retribution versus recovery of funds. Because depending on who you go to, you'll get one, but you won't get the other.
That's right.
So the short answer is that there are multiple groups. There are private businesses that are engaged in the effort to recover funds. And there are also state institutions for various countries that recover funds in the course of criminal investigations. Now, in the case where the states take possession, you will typically get retribution over a timeline of many years, but the parties affected will not typically receive any money back. In the case where you go to private business, which is where all the success in the recovery of funds has been, these parties will make a case in the course of their investigations for the recovery of funds, and they will, if they are successful, return the funds to the affected people. There may or may not be criminal consequences afterward for the affected people. There are a variety of independent firms and investigation firms in the course of doing this. One could say this has breathed an amazing life into private investigation firms worldwide. They have a whole new market that they never knew existed, and it has come to reward them very amply. So, to turn back to the early question, is crypto a good place to do crime? Not really. As we're quickly seeing, the millions of eyes to protect code against hacks is proving very, very successful, very much due to the financial incentive. But those same forces work on the investigation side. You could have 1,000 people following your trail. And if you made a single mistake, well, the jig's up.
I love that the tables are starting to turn, and I love that. Is time of the essence? If this happened to you immediately, do you get on this immediately? Obviously, as we know with anything, time is of the essence. But what is the time window that's better?
Historically, it's been indefinite. If you steal the funds, there's no place to put them. They're all marked. They're all trackable. And so there's this race against time where, thankfully, we have these armies of investigators now combing on chain through the transaction activity to find out where this money went and reclaim it to its rightful owners versus the criminals trying to hide for as long as they possibly can until the tech matures or may mature. It's not even a certainty, such that they can move that value.
What about the Lazarus Group, the North Korea hackers? Presumably, they're taking crypto, they're hacking. Are they sitting on those funds? Can they offload those funds in a jurisdiction that they can walk around freely? They're probably state heroes. What about different jurisdictions outside of Western and developed infrastructure eyes?
For guys like the Lazarus Group, they're not worried about this at all. Not in the least. And state-level actors have no problems cleaning the money. Cleaning the money is a problem for private people, not governments. So for them, they just walk away with it. You're going to see, and I believe, it's not a certainty, we have already seen the introduction of many more of these state-level attacking groups in crypto because they see it's the future. They see it's going to work. They see it's going to be incredible. They know CBDCs are going to be running on very similar rails, and they would benefit from having teams and institutions that are directed at harming their opponents and getting a financial reward.
You raised a huge point in the future. The world is going into CBDCs. Could this potentially trigger such economic losses if there's a successful hack? Sovereign jurisdiction versus another sovereign jurisdiction. This is now a foreign relations issue.
Well, the scary part about that is we've already been in that world for a long time. Yeah. So you're probably familiar with the hack on the Bank of Bangladesh, which was also a Lazarus Group product. They built their expertise for attacking crypto by attacking central banks first. So you already have this state-on-state, espionage and theft of value in funds and resources that's been occurring for a long time, first via human means, then via the digital infrastructure that many of those banks manage. There's a reason banks around the world have massive cybersecurity spends, because they need it. Otherwise, they will be robbed. Those places are not safe for your money either. You just don't hear about it. And now, world of CBDCs, where we're going to have all this DeFi-like infrastructure operating under similar conditions, you have the exact same security concerns. So we've already seen, right, there have already been billion-dollar hacks, so to speak, traditional financial institutions that are more quiet, but we're going to see an explosion of that with the rise of CBDCs. And the funny thing is, we'll all recognize the value of it. CBDCs are going to be wonderful for market efficiency. It's just, the bankers say that because it's obvious, right? The transaction costs we incur today are very large compared to what they could be. But we'll all be looking then and be like, wow, those DeFi guys, they're so much more efficient, so much more secure. We were, hitting them with a stick. We didn't know we couldn't do a better job. And this will in turn push more and more money into DeFi.
That is a crystal ball prophecy, if ever I heard. I'm going to mark that one and file it for sure. That is definitely a level of insight that we have not particularly heard around CBDCs and the threat thereof. I want to ask about FTX here. The day after FTX filed for bankruptcy in November, the exchange reportedly lost around $650 million to a mysterious hack, although the bankruptcy documents stated that it lost $372 million. The hacker's identity is still unknown, but hey, you say we could track people down here. What do you, just your opinion about what might have happened here?
It seems like the same old skullduggery that's happened so many times in traditional finance. Just like, massive losses of such cases are almost always an inside job. So that proved true for CeFi as well. Could this be a massive hack by an external actor? Possibly. But I think the balance of probabilities is that it was something else. And it probably follows the same pattern as the long history of CeFi hacks and the long history of financial losses in traditional finance have always had.
To wrap up this very interesting conversation to kick off the year, where do you see this year's attention going from your perspective and certainly the industry? The trust has really been eroded. And part of it is not only can I trust the actors and maybe even some of the platforms, it feels really scary out there. But where do you think the attention is going to be this year?
I think the attention will be of the builders on the builders for the latest and the greatest tech. We are creating this massive amount of infrastructure for securing this code. You now have systems like Immunefi for operating at scale. You now have better and better formal verification tech. You now have better auditors. You now have better monitoring solutions. It's this whole stack of incredible technology that's being created on the security side. And you also have this incredible stack of technology being created on the side of DeFi and bridges. There's a lot of really interesting new financial products. Like, we were all waiting for fintech to innovate, and they kind of never really did. But DeFi is innovating, and some of the products are just really quite incredible. And so this amazing combination of factors is coming together on this new on-chain infrastructure.
Well, thanks for doing your part, and we do our part. It's on all of us to continue to gain knowledge, educate, and that responsibility also rests very equally on the shoulders of our audience. And thank you, audience, for joining us here. Mitchell, I want to thank you for really your insights and your perspective. I know I got smarter, and I hope everybody who's watching realizes that they got a little insight into the future in a really deep way. So thank you very much, Mitchell.
My pleasure.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this latest episode of Word on the Block. I feel a little smarter right now, so thank you. And I hope you feel that way, too. I'm Angie Lau, Forkast Editor-in-Chief. It was great spending time with you today. Until the next time.